What are you talking about again?
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Culture Clinic. My name is Julia. Uh, this is Kwesi, and we're here today to talk a little bit about employer branding and how you can use recognition to elevate your employer brand. So before we dive in, this is the Culture Clinic show. So we do this to help people leaders shape great workplace culture so that your people are inspired to do their best work. So yes, welcome. It is AMA format. Ask me anything, ask us anything. And so if you have any questions, anything you'd like us to address on the topic of employer branding, using recognition to boost your employer brand, please leave a question in the comments on LinkedIn or YouTube so that Kwesi can address them. Awesome. Okay. A quick intro, I suppose, for both of us. So hello, everyone. My name is Julia. I'm on the people team here at Gusto. At Gusto, I take care of lots of things, people things internally, but also all of our recruitment. So, hopefully be adding some spice to the conversation as it pertains to recruitment and building an employer brand on the candidate side. And yes, I'm your host for today. Let me pass it over to Kwesi to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kwesi. I am been in HR for about a little over 20 years, and I've had the pleasure of working with some really cool companies along the way. So way back when at Nortel, when it was a lot of people, I think we're at 97,000 people when I was there, and about 4,000 when I left. So that was a bit of a change. And at BlackBerry as well. A little bit of time at Manulife and then at Shopify, and then I've been on my own since, helping companies with culture and HR, particularly total rewards areas. Excited to talk about today and share what I have experienced with you.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for being here, Kwesi. So let's start off just as we tend to of definitions. And so the first thing we'll touch on before we really get into recognition is just broadly, what is employer brand? What is employer branding? And so I'll actually take our first stab here of just like your employer brand is your reputation as an employer, is like as simply as I think I can put it. And you can get a lot more granular, and I'm sure somebody on the marketing side could add a lot as it pertains to like how you can share your employer brand through your careers page, through job postings, how you can market that externally. But what we're going to focus on mainly today is how you build that branding and how you build that positive reputation internally by like being a great employer. Anything to add there, Kwesi?
No, I mean it's an interesting topic. I've had along my way in my career, I've had the responsibility for recognition in a few places, and with recognition, I think for me the large ROI part of the role I was playing and doing was to create programs that were used in a lot of cases for employer branding. And so for me, I mean, I'm happy to add that sort of lens, because to me, recognition and the programs I've been a part of have been a part of that employer brand, whether they're showing it externally or internally. And so excited to share that, some of the, I think, really fun things I've gotten to do in recognition for the employer brand.
Cool. You're so excited to get talking about it.
Yeah, it's fun. Enough fun enough. I really like. For me, this was the fun stuff. Like, there's some really cool things that otherwise you wouldn't get to do, or you wouldn't think you would get to do as an employer.
Totally. Yeah. No, and I'm excited for you to share some of those examples of programs that you've worked on. And I think what's interesting about thinking about employer branding through a lens of recognition is like that to me is intentional employer branding, where you're intentionally trying to, you're running recognition programs and you're running other people programs in order to build a strong employer brand. But like anything, if you're not doing it intentionally, it can have a cascading effect. And so I think like unintentional, negative employer branding can come from things like, not having a recognition program. And that can be highlighted in Glassdoor reviews and, low rates of people sort of telling their friends and family, hey, I work at this really great place, you got to check it out, and that kind of thing. So yeah, cool. Kwesi, let's kind of jump right into the recognition side of things. Like, how you started to touch on it, but how can a recognition program or recognition generally impact your employer brand?
I'll just start off by first like just broadening the word recognition for a second. I don't just mean the um, point or card or program that you're running to just recognize people at the one-off stages throughout the year. For me, recognition is that bucket of the programs we're running to recognize the accomplishments or the kind of contributions of our employees to whatever our goal is. And so sometimes that's other things besides the one the recognition program that people kind of jump to. And so to me, that bucket of what do we do when we achieve something, or when we just demonstrate the right values, or when we demonstrate the right work that we're asking our employees to do, and in doing in those kind of moments when they have achieved, or when they have produced, or when they have gone above and beyond, that moment of recognition, which can happen in different forms, I think those are the moments that you can really do a good job of recognizing them, but also show it off to the world. This is what happens when you come here and you participate in the success or the efforts that we're doing. And so as you build out those type of programs, they can have a huge impact on the employer brand. I'm going to go on for another second. Sorry, this is a topic I clearly love too much. But for me, when you're building the employer brand, if you think of it as a triangle, at the bottom, you've got sort of like the programs that we're all going to have. You've got salaries and bonuses and benefits and retirement and paid time off and all those type of things. So to me, those are in the sort of, when you get to that small top of the triangle when you're building the brand, that's where you get all the differentiators, because we all have pay, we all have bonuses or some sort of concept thereof. We all have those programs. So when you get into that sort of like recognition space, as I just defined it, you got to all the stuff that actually just separate you. Like, what is that? How does that match your culture and how you want to work? And so that's for me is really cool. I think recognition can have a huge impact on it, because it is going to be the differentiator when you look at the rest of the programs that you're running.
Totally. And Kwesi, you've mentioned a couple of times of just like how much fun it was to be on teams at organizations where they were trying to build a great employer brand through recognition and through great programs. What's one that comes to mind of something like super, super exciting that you got to work on that, built a great employer brand?
Geez Louise. I'm trying to think of what there are some like large ones that at BlackBerry and Shopify did that were, concerts and those type of large, but those ones to me, they're shiny and they're big. But for me, I really liked Ice Cream Fridays. I'll pick that one. Like it was a chore and a half to figure out how to do, but it created an opportunity every Friday for, all the employees and all the buildings around the world to kind of get together and celebrate sort of some of the work that they've done and connect, et cetera. And so that was probably one. And I'd say the other, I'm trying to think if there's another one off the top of my head that I was like, oh, that was really Crystal Blackberries. I'll use that one as well. Our milestone program, when I got there, our milestone program, had the typical large catalog, choose whatever from the catalog. We started making, at BlackBerry, we had a lot of pride around the actual device that you were holding in your hand when that was a thing. And so we started doing their annual, like sort of your milestone. You got a crystal version of the BlackBerry that we had made up for each year, depending on what model we had released that year. And so the pride in the people receiving that bold or that curve or whatever it was in that crystal form was really interesting to see, because people were like, they made sure they got it. And so I think that program was really cool. And that was just a riff on the milestone program.
Cool. Awesome. And it's so funny, like Kwesi's work oftentimes focused on sort of internal programs and how that affects an employer brand. And what I do a lot of thinking about in the talent acquisition space of, okay, we do these things internally, like how can we show that to our candidates, or how does it even matter to our candidates? And so something that I've sort of been thinking about is, how having recognition programs and having great people programs directly affects your tenure and your engagement and these kinds of things. And like, as a job seeker, if I'm going to look at an organization on LinkedIn, if you scroll down, you can see median tenure at this organization. It's like 1.3 years. Oh, okay. 2.8 years. Oh, okay. In tech, we're definitely getting up there. And and I think it's just so fascinating that these programs can be designed to like make employees really enjoy working there while they're there. But I wouldn't call it the unintended consequence, because it certainly is intentional, but it has such a great impact on recruitment and candidates wanting to come kind of join the company and partake in Ice Cream Fridays and kind of get all that good stuff as well.
Yeah. And it's just, for me, a lot of what you're portraying as the employer brand should be what we're doing, right? And so unless we're just making it up, now we're just marketing, right? If we're just like, and even now you should make stuff up. So no offense to all the marketing people watching. I'm just saying that as an employer brand, I think we should represent like the actual culture that you're joining the people, and hopefully then when they go through that journey through recruitment and joining, they kind of connect with, yes, this is the brand I wanted to be a part of, and I saw represented.
Totally. And it's a question I get all the time from candidates, because I think people are starting to clue into the fact that employer branding is marketing, and what you do internally can be different. Like they don't always align. And so I'll get questions of like, okay, y'all seem like a really fun place to work. What's it actually like? Like, does it actually connect? And I love getting to say like, yes, it actually does. Or at least in my experience, it certainly has. Cool. So we were talking a bit before about sort of Ice Cream Fridays and things like that. And you mentioned that there were some, those were the smaller ones that were really impactful. But you see some companies do these like huge outlandish events for all their employees and it looks really sick. What's what's better? Like, is it better to sort of just have a steady recognition program? Maybe it loses its flash over a little while. Or is it better as an employer branding play to do these big kind of outlandish events?
I feel like you have to earn the right to do outlandish events personally. If you're not taking care of the basics, you don't have if you're doing an outlandish event, but you don't actually have a good culture and you don't have people who are happy and feeling recognized and doing all the other good things you're expecting to do at work. And, even referring people and all the good stuff that you want to see, but you're just doing outlandish things. The outlandish things will be great. They will be great for your brand, and they will probably get some people into your pipeline and maybe hired. But how long does that really actually work in terms of retaining and keeping them and driving them on the work they have to do day in, day out? And so, I make the example, if you're a brand that's not doing very well, the employees aren't happy working, but you go and you hire Beyonce tomorrow to come in and do a concert, they'll all have a great time at that concert. And then the week after, there will be the rumblings of, well, great, we still don't have this, we still don't do that, we still do this, but we got to see Beyonce. And so that wears off really quickly. If you've kind of earned the right to do that big concert, the big concerts are fantastic. Like personally, I've done quite a few where they've been really cool. Like I've got to work, we did U2 at BlackBerry, Tragically Hip, Shopify, we did Major Lazer. So we did I've done some, I think we did Alicia Keys at one point. No, that was a developer conference. But we've done some cool ones, which are great for people talking about it. But that's because that was on top of being happy with what else they had, right? And so for me, I think the ROI is there if you've got the basics covered.
Totally. It's the elevated pizza party of like, I'm not comparing Beyonce to pizza, although they're two of my favorite things. But it's sort of like a pizza party is not going to make anyone feel better if we hate our jobs and if we don't feel recognized by our bosses and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I will throw on there that I don't think sometimes we think outlandish has to be huge like Beyonce. It doesn't. Sometimes outlandish is just, if you've got a smaller team, you're not bringing a Beyonce. So for example, I was working with a smaller team in Toronto. There are about 40-ish employees. So we'd hit some goals that we thought were pretty hard to achieve. And so we rented a bus and sent them down to a winery, and they had a great time for it, and they came back, right? And so that wasn't planned, but that was outlandish for what they didn't expect it, et cetera. Or you've put in a ping pong table. I've done that as well, where it's just like not something that was outlandish, but kind of just jumped off the page where like, hold on, this is really cool. We got to do this, right?
Totally. Yeah. Cool. And then you mentioned a little bit about ROI, but I'd love to dig in and sort of just like dial in on that a bit of what is the ROI of having a great employer brand, and how can you make the case? How can you make the business case that investing in employer brand is a good idea?
Funny times, I think this might be an easier sell than actual recognition programs to a lot of people because because when you want to hire, employer brand gets brought really to the top of the list, right? Are we getting people in the pipeline? Are we seeing candidates? Are we getting the referrals we want internally? Are we, do we have to use a bunch of external recruitment firms because we're not seeing the candidates we want? And so for me, when you're building the case for the employer brand and for things that impact it, you can kind of draw, nearly straight lines from some of the programs that you would run on the recognition side to impacting the employer brand, and also be able to maximize it in terms of how you speak about it externally, because you can really talk about, Ice Cream Fridays. You can talk about that really externally really easily. You can talk about, U2 externally, but it's hard to talk about, your recognition program internally in the same way. So I think for me, the ROI on some of these programs is really clear on the external side. On the internal side, I think for me, when you start to do these programs really well internally, you start to see other things go away. Like, you don't necessarily need as much of a referral budget internally, because people will start referring. Other people want to work. They're hearing each other and seeing each other doing these things. And that brand has created a influx where you can start to put some of that, referral budget, for example, into more of those programs, because they'll create more of a cycle. It is, like I said, harder, easier to draw than some of the other programs that we as HR and awards professionals have to create. But I think, the employer brand, I think, has a really good line to your external and your internal ROIs.
So it's almost like, instead of, maybe this sounds bad, I'm not sure. Instead of making the case of, hey, let's have a recognition program because it's a great thing to do, it sets us apart from competitors or from other employers, or, retention, like these things that are maybe a little bit harder to measure. It's sort of like, or leading with, it'll have a huge impact on our employer brand. The next time we have a big hiring push, like, our time to hire will be cut down by a third. Those are things that sound really, you can buy into that pretty easily.
Yeah, you can, exactly. And especially if you can get people, especially if your recognition program truly is impactful and people are kind of buzzing about it or using it often. And it might not sound as big and flashy as the big event that we just talked about, but if you've gotten to use part of what, some of your recognition towards your trip to Australia, or use some of your recognition towards other things, just dinner, whatever it is, if you got to be impactful in their lives, especially when they've got family members and friends, etc., that see that impact, then it multiplies really quickly, right?
Totally. Yeah. The amount of times that I'll open my email and see that, even if it wasn't a gift, if someone just sent me recognition of like, hey, thanks so much for your help on this, I'm like, oh, they thought of me,
right.
Like they noticed. It's just such an incredible feeling. And anyone who I'm around at the time, I'm a bit of a chatterbox, so they know the impact that recognition on Gusto has on me personally, and that just sort of multiplies when you think of everyone at the organization talking to their friends and family about work.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we've got a question here from I can't actually see the person's name. It says LinkedIn user, but what are some go-tos to increase employee participation in company initiatives? So Kwesi, when we're talking about Ice Cream Fridays or the proverbial pizza party, those kinds of things, like, how can we increase employee participation in these initiatives?
I'm just trying to think my go-tos. On some of the ones that are like the ice cream, you don't have to ask anyone to go for ice cream. They're doing that themselves. So I won't put that one in there. But when you're looking to increase employee participation, for me, if I get the employees or some representation of the employees involved, I would try to do that. I want our leaders to actually live it and do it. For me, the go-to is I want a leader, like a senior leader, not robotically sending an email out saying, please do this, or like, I want them to actually do it in a very demonstrable way where they are actually enjoying it and participating. I think that's a go-to for me. And I'm trying to think what else. Trying to think if there's any other go-tos I could throw in there for you. But for me, I want a leader that's actually smiling, loving it, having fun with whatever it is. And I want the employees actually involved in creating what it is and being proud of what it is themselves, right? And then I want to tell this, for me, last one, I want to tell the stories after. Even if there were 3 people, I want to tell it like they were the greatest 3 people that had the best time in the whole world in whatever that part of that program is.
Totally. Yeah. Julie, by the way, thanks for your question. And to elaborate a little bit on how you can do these in remote environments. I think, and one thing Kwesi started to touch on is get your employees to be proud of it, of like, lean into what's already happening that's going well. So I heard of this great example once, and we could probably do it in Gusto too, because we are passionate about our food choices here. But I heard of one company who they just had a lot of discourse on Slack and a lot of joking around about the best chicken sandwich in Toronto. Okay, whatever. But what they did and what their people team did and their program managers did was like lean into that and recognize, oh, this is something people are sort of popping off about on their own accord. We're not facilitating, hey, everyone talk about your favorite chicken sandwich in Toronto, because everyone, if it's kind of fabricated like that, nobody would. And so they leaned into what's already happening that's gathering traction, and they organized a debate for everyone to participate in. And you could kind of put up your slides and make your arguments. And I'm sure if you had a hybrid situation, you could bring in those chicken sandwiches on the Friday for everybody to try. And so a great way that I've found to get buy-in and get more participation, especially in remote environments, is to lean into what's already happening and kind of have an ear to the ground of what's already going on that you can capitalize on.
Yeah. And I don't know where that company is, but I'd like to work there with whatever chicken sandwich day is happening. Yeah. But Julie, I would add, sorry, I just saw more of the question that you were asking. If you can kind of build in some of those programs or that engagement into what they're doing. I mean, right now, for me with remote working, the challenge we're having is how do we get people in the same time and on the same call or whatever it is. And that's the challenge. And so for me, if we can, it might not be the same, like we can bring everyone together, but if we can bring, or everyone at the same time on the same Zoom or whatever it is, for me, if we have to do them in smaller chunks, but it's more organic to their schedules or whatever their cadence of calls or whatever it is, that to me is how I would adjust somewhat to what we are seeing happening now with people being on a lot of different schedules. And so you can no longer rely on everyone being at the office from 10 to 4. Right. So I think for me, I try to be a bit more organic and do a lot more in smaller groups.
The other thing I might add to this that I'm just sort of thinking is events, it doesn't have to equal great employee experience. Because when you think of your employer brand, maybe one of your biggest pieces that you're trying to, differentiate yourself from other employers is that you're a really flexible workforce and you offer, flexible hours, great for caregivers, all these kinds of things, pickups, drop-offs from school, doctor's appointments. And so maybe participation at, your all team event isn't the most important thing that people are talking to their friends and family about outside of work. Maybe it is, hey, I got to go do pickups and drop-offs today, and it was so easy because we don't have that micromanaging culture, and I can do that. And my boss trusts that I'm going to get my work done in a way that works for me. And so, I know Gusto is fully remote. And so I totally understand that we do want people to participate in these things. And we want people to, and people are saying that they want this informal communication and informal way of connecting and that kind of stuff. But there's other things that positively impact your employer brand that don't look like events. Does that make sense, Kwesi?
Totally.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. Okay. So kind of move on to another question here, but how can bringing recognition into your candidate experience impact your employer brand? So currently we've kind of talked a lot about employer brand for current employees and being a great place to work. But how does this kind of translate into the candidate experience?
For me, if you can expose your candidates, especially further along in the journey, my take anyway, to what it's really like to work there. What are some of these experiences? What are they? For example, I think I know Gusto does some partnerships with OneDrop. If you can talk about that OneDrop along the way, which is not exactly recognition, but you get where I'm coming from, then great. I haven't seen many programs where they've actually got to like the point gift card type recognition program, but you can then start to get people to see that this is how we actually act. My brain just froze. How our employer brand actually plays out internally is real during that experience. It can only help them along that journey.
Totally. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna flip the question on you because I've we were talking and I know that you you actually use it in your candidate experience now, like the recognition program. So I want to see how that works.
Yeah. I'd say we use recognition in sort of two ways in our candidate experience. The first is recognition more like as a culture or as a concept. And so it's everything from like providing detailed and honest feedback to candidates. That's recognition, right? That honesty and sincerity. Similarly, sort of like recognizing a candidate's experience, even if it's from a different department or outside of the industry that you're recruiting for. And I experienced that. I was a job seeker coming from, the world of nonprofit outdoor education and trying to bust into tech. And, the difference in the interviews I had when someone was like, oh, didn't really understand what I did, didn't really understand the value, in those interviews where someone was like, oh, wow, that's really cool experience. And, oh, wow, you must have learned so much there. And I can identify all these transferable skills. Like that felt amazing. And I remember that, even in the jobs that I didn't get, that did wonders for that company's employer brand, is sort of them recognizing the validity of my experience. So I'd say like recognition as a culture, you can really weave it in and showcase candidates, this is how we are internally as well. And the other way you can use recognition in your candidate experience is actually using a tool to give rewards and recognition to candidates. And so at Gusto, we think it's important to pay candidates for take-home assignments and that kind of thing. And so we use Gusto to send gift cards to candidates once they've completed their take-home assignment, regardless of whether we move ahead with their candidacy. And so that's something that we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback about. And it's really cool for someone to get to use the platform and see the platform as a candidate without, regardless of what happens next.
I love that. I mean, when we were talking about it, I was going to go on a rant about like, nobody actually has recognition along there. And I was like, but you guys actually do it, which is fantastic, right? I also love that you found an organic way to introduce your actual product and brand to the candidates, right? And so I've seen lots of companies have done this in different ways. But if you can find a way to introduce your company, like your brand and your product to the candidates, so they can actually see if they actually want to connect with it, it's a great sort of pairing.
Totally, yeah, it is. It's a really special way for them to understand our product before they even step foot in the door.
Yeah.
So we're almost at time here, Kwesi. Based on what we've talked about today, what are some takeaways? Like if you were to leave everyone with one nugget, one highlight from today, what might that be?
Geez, I might have two, but I'll go with one first. I think for me, the programs that you have like at your disposal to really impact or define your employer brand. We talked about sort of the triangle, the bottom layer being the big programs, bonuses, salaries, benefits, all those other big programs that most of us have in our organizations. And then there's the stuff at the top, which is like the recognition and different ways of, flexing some of our other muscles in terms of program design. And to me, when you look at those, to move the needle on the big programs, you have to have huge budgets and huge shifts and huge amounts of resources, right? If you want to change your salary bands by 10%, think of the amount of money and approvals and probably knows you're going to get to do that. But taking sort of a 1 or a 2% and really going after a killer recognition set of programs at the top of that triangle can really move the needle for your employees and your potential employees. And for me, that would be, I'd be like, you can really do some really impactful programs in the recognition space for your brand, as an employer, and as for your employees, at a fraction of the cost and the resources that you could some of the other programs you have at your disposal.
Cool. I love that. I think that's such a cool way of looking at it. I think for me, something that stood out, and just when I think of the talent acquisition space, we always budget for employee referrals, and that's kind of a no-brainer. But this conversation has made me rethink that it's made me rethink that a little bit of what could we be doing with that budget that can positively impact our employer brand, way more than just having one or two people kind of tell a friend. So, make people want to work there because you're a great place to work, not because these one or two people are sort of doing that outreach.
I love that. I love that. Because for me, the referrals are kind of counterproductive. You want people to come work with you, like especially if you have great people around you. You should want them to come to work to work at the great place that you work at as well. So spend the budget to make it a great place. Fantastic.
Totally. Awesome. All right. Well, Kwesi, thank you so much for joining me to talk about recognition and employer branding. And folks, thank you so much for the questions you had. It really made it a very fun conversation. So thanks everyone for joining, and we hope to